Is it? It's a new fun thing. Okay, so today we're doing the Gemini edition of Space Within. We're practicing astrology-influenced yin yoga practice. And as we begin, we'll start with a nice tall standing position. Coming into your space, coming in onto your mat, and not needing anything else but you and your body. Finding maybe a little bit of a wider stance here. Shifting forward, shifting back, maybe a little bit side to side, and finding a pretty neutral stance. Shrugging the shoulders up and back and down, maybe a couple of times here, shoulder rolling up and back and down. Maybe starting to link that up with your breath. Noticing if you want to take any neck rolls as you roll out the shoulders. And starting here with this pretty active stance. So we'll actually shine the palms forward, I suppose, and reaching those fingers all away from each other, lifting up the toes, spreading them all out and placing them back down. Lifting those shoulders up and back and down, closing down the eyes and really opening up through all of the fingers and all of the toes. Inhaling slowly. And exhaling also slowly. Connecting in here with your breath, bringing your hip bones a little bit more upward, tucking the tailbone just slightly, lengthening up through the crown of the head, standing nice and tall here on the mat. Maybe bringing the shoulder blades a little bit more together and down the back, feeling nice and proud and broad through the clavicles. And here, imagining now your feet and your hands rooting down into the earth. As you spread your palms wide, imagining them actually spreading, maybe either energetically, or sometimes I even like to imagine banyan tree limbs, which are also the roots, stretching down into the earth and feeling this innate connection that you do have with the earth. Just a couple of breaths there, tuning into the support of the earth underneath you as you bring the crown of the head a little bit higher, bringing a little bit more length in through the crown and the spine and the legs and the limbs. As you're ready, we'll sweep those arms up overhead, bringing those hands to touch. Inhale, gaze up high. Exhale, sweep those hands back down to your thighs. We'll do that a couple of times. Inhale, lengthen up through those arms and the spine. Hands come to touch overhead. Exhale, hands back down to the side. We'll take that 5 more times in your own time. Bringing those hands up tall. Maybe moving with your breath here. Maybe there's some crunching and crinkling in those shoulders. Just working it out. Still pretty open through the palms. Maybe that's 5. Releasing them down by the side. And now we'll take the arms out to the side, hands still forward, and we'll shake those arms out forward and back, flapping those arms. Shoulders are stable, plugged into the sockets, or really where they live, in the shoulder girdle. Just the wrists are flapping here. And it's always an interesting one in my mind to figure out where is this effort even coming from. And if it starts to be too intense, you can slow it down. You can also walk around to try to distract yourself from where the effort is happening. You know what I mean? Continuing to breathe deeply here into your lungs, cleaning out that stagnant stuff that's down there at the bottom. Exhaling out, maybe a bunch more. Exhales. Okay, another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Throw it down and just feel, closing down those eyes, feeling that prana, that life force circulate through your limbs. No effort now through the arms, through the hands. Feeling that sparkle. This is you. All right, slowly blinking those eyes back open if you haven't already. And we'll take some tapping, we'll do some tapping rather, bringing the hands. I kind of like it when I bring my hands into points like this, or you can do 2 fingers or however feels good. We'll tap into K27 here just below the clavicle, just tapping into that meridian point, acupressure point, supposedly where all the meridians cross in the body. Couple of breaths here, tapping into this point. If it's tender, it means you need it. Gazing high, maybe bringing that chin up, stretching through the throat just a little bit. As you exhale, bringing the hands down onto the sternum, so just underneath that, maybe finding a point that is tender. So tapping down to the thymus gland, the thymus point above the thymus gland that has to do with your immune system, boosting your immune system. And you can be really pretty, not so tender here. You can really thud. I'm sure you can hear I'm really thudding into that sternum. You're not so tender, you can't take it. Though it might be pretty tender, and so it might actually feel really nice to just palpate and kind of move that skin around, move that muscle over the sternum around just a little bit. All right, next bringing that down to the ribs, and this might be extra super tender. Sometimes it really is in my body, so it just depends. So start tapping a little bit here on the sides, and maybe it feels really good and you can really tap super hard, or it's maybe even nauseating. It can be so intense that it's even a little nauseating. So in that case, maybe a little less, or maybe even just palpating around in those ribs and those intercostals and just moving that, the connective tissue kind of around and over the ribs, if that's a little bit too intense. Couple of breaths. If you feel it, you need it. All right, shaking those hands out, we'll bring it just underneath the eyes, right here, these points underneath the eyes, and just tap, tap, tap underneath the eyes. This is a grounding point. So maybe again, as we're standing, and as you tap into the cheeks, even envision this energy. Maybe it's like shooting lights or laser beams shooting into your face, down your body into the center of the earth. Why not? All right, shaking all that out, bringing the right hand to the left shoulder or the other one, squeezing into the top of the shoulder. And as you exhale, bring it across the body and fling it off. So a couple of times on either side there, pressing into the top of the trap, dragging it across the body, fling it off. And maybe again, starting to move with your own breath here. So maybe it feels good to slow it down or move even a little faster. Shaking all that out. Okay, we're taking it to the wall. Hopefully you have a wall nearby. And we're just gonna do some finger stretching first. So what that's gonna look like is starting with the pinkies, bringing both the pinkies toward the wall. Shoulders are nice and relaxed here. Yes, we're just stretching the fingers. As the sun is transiting through Gemini, Gemini is the ruler over your fingers, your wrists, your shoulders, your lungs, trachea, bronchi, and the pleura, the sac around your lungs. So we'll take a couple of rounds of breath here as we stretch in just the pinkies. And if you're like me and remember that actually when you stretch your fingers and you have rings on, the ring actually will inhibit the stretch, so I'm going to take a break from wearing the ring. Maybe 3 or 4 full breath cycles here, actually while stretching in through just the pinkies. And noticing too what's happening with the rest of your body. I'm kind of angled toward the camera, but if you want to actually face the wall as you do have the hands or fingers stretching into the wall, might be a little bit better. Slowing down the breath here. As you're ready, we'll move to the ring finger and just the ring finger. So not both of them up, but just the ring finger up. So I'm kind of pinning that to the wall and bringing the rest of the hands down just until that stretch happens, just until that first layer of resistance happens in just the ring finger. So maybe closing down the eyes and maybe feeling that you haven't maybe ever stretched just your ring finger before, and maybe you have, I don't know. It's okay if this feels kind of weird or even awkward because there are regular stretches that we'll do in athletic contexts, in yogic contexts, just throughout the day, even when you wake up. And then there are parts of the body that don't really get as much attention, that perhaps need some. One more breath here with the ring fingers. As you're ready, we'll release the ring fingers, and now the middle fingers. Stretching up just the middle fingers and letting the rest of the fingers dangle downward. And maybe even take sort of micro movements as you bring the wrists a little bit side to side, finding where that would actually feel best in your hands. Noticing perhaps if you are flexing or bringing more effort in through the wrists, the elbows, the shoulders. And again, maybe taking that opportunity to bring those shoulders up and back and down, or maybe even wiggle them out a little bit. Maybe you even notice you clench in the jaw or somewhere else that is actually not helping. And as you stand here, notice even what's going on in the hips and the lower legs. Notice if you're gripping with the toes or swaying through the back, and maybe can neutralize that back a little bit, bringing it forward and back. Maybe even a little side to side, a little movement into that lower body. Maybe as the discomfort rises in your hands. Who knows? All right, as you're ready, letting those middle fingers go, and then index fingers. Just stretching up those index fingers in whatever way that feels like a stretch. Giving these pointers a couple of breaths. And noticing what happens after even a couple of breaths here. The idea with yin yoga or yin movements, yin philosophy, is utilizing more time and less intensity to gain more spaciousness in and around the muscle fibers so that you can do all the other yang stuff more efficiently, without as much injury, with less sort of cumbersome blockages in the way, as inflammation is a response to some yang activities. When there is more space in the body, there is less blockages when the inflammation comes, so there's less injury. You follow me? All right, letting those fingers go, and then thumbs. Actually pressing the thumbs in and finding some kind of stretch along that thumb meat section. And it might be a little bit of a different configuration. The way I've figured out to do it is to have my arms actually straight, so I can kind of pin the thumbs against the wall and then let the rest of my hands dangle downward. And there's still some effort into my arms to keep the thumbs up, but that's a way that works. Or even being kind of close and with the elbows tucked in. That can also work. Just a couple of more breaths here. In addition to some shoulder and arm stretching and opening, a lot of things having to do, or a lot of Geminian dispersing information will be sometimes related to carpal tunnel physically, as there is inflammation that gets kind of thwarted, or not kind of, very much thwarted in and through the shoulder girdle, which will then impinge nerves on their way down through the arm, be inflamed in through the carpal tunnel, which is a structure in the wrist, and then cause carpal tunnel syndrome. So it's like the nerve that's communicating down the arm, dispersing information through the fingers, is thwarted and has an inflammatory response in the carpal tunnel, making the syndrome. What? Okay, we're letting all that go and really releasing those wrists vigorously in front of you for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let it go. All right, we're still at the wall, and this time we'll take the hands planted against the wall, and we'll simultaneously take a pyramid pose with the legs. So what that's going to look like is first planting the hands against the wall. Maybe you kind of find where that stance is going to be, where you can have a 90-degree-ish angle here with the body and the wall. So again, I'm going to be a little bit kind of this way so you can see me here. So not exactly flush with the wall, but you'll be angled toward the wall, and then step one of your feet forward. Let's maybe start with the left foot. Bringing the left foot forward, planting those hands into the wall, and then guiding the chest forward toward that leg, any amount. And then you might negotiate a little bit here with where it is this shows up. And this might show up in a lot of places, and it might just show up in a few. So for example, this might be pretty loud in the wrists. It might be pretty loud in your back calf. So whatever calf is in the back. And maybe you take a couple of breaths here to find where your sort of full expression would be. And by full, I mean wherever it is you're first feeling it. Finding that first edge. And being able to give that first edge time, attention, your breath. Somewhere where you can be without changing the breath. Somewhere where you can actually ride that wave, ride that line of comfort and discomfort. Allowing the head to drop forward, releasing the back of the neck. And as you see fit, maybe taking sort of micro movements, moving the hips slightly to one side or the other, tucking the tailbone just slightly to see where it is that moves the sensation. And if at any time you're starting to feel numbness, tingling, or pain somewhere in your body, it is a good indicator to back out just a little bit. No need to add more things to deal with later. No need to add more injury as you are giving yourself this time to undo things. To give yourself, your body, your mind some attention. If it feels good to maybe even bend the back knee, to move that sensation elsewhere, perhaps up the leg. These are all options. Staying with that breath. Filling up the side ribs, the back ribs. Rinsing out as you exhale. So Gemini is a mutable sign. It's the last sign of spring. And Gemini, in this mutable power it has, is preparing for what's next. It's dispersing of information. We've just moved beyond the fixed, sensual stubbornness of Taurus, and now we are dispersing that information into the next phase, which is preparing for summer. So we must tell all of the stories, uncover all of the truths. We must know every angle of every perspective so we can make a clear decision, so we can be really, really well informed. This is the Gemini signature. As you're ready, we'll start to come out of this. Perhaps bending the knees would feel good and taking a step forward. And then swapping out the feet with whatever foot was in front, swapping out the feet. We don't have to make it more complicated. Actually, before we do that, we'll take a counter stretch to the wrists. So turning the wrists inside out, so we'll take a sort of reverse prayer. So prayer position, flipping the hands around, and bringing the backs of the wrists together to touch. So your hands might be really up close to your face, bringing the backs of the hands to touch, even reaching the thumbs toward one another to touch each other as well, and then the fingers. Okay, good, great. And then bringing those hands down the front of your body. Your arms will stop you when they're done moving down. When the thumbs start moving apart, when the wrists start moving apart, totally fine, but just note what's kind of going on with those structures. And if you've also really internally rotated to get there. If so, again, we'll just take that nice big open reverse stretch. And as I do that, yes, my thumbs come apart. It's totally fine. Bringing those shoulder blades together and down, bringing those hips, the hip points up toward my face, nice and tall here, countering that stretch. Yes, lots. So as we are in that influence of Gemini, the superpower to disperse of all of this information, to give it out, to be as objective as possible, to know as many points of view as possible with this soothing balm of curiosity is so helpful. And the way I physically like to think of it with these nerves and these structures of the shoulders, the elbows, the wrists, the hands is perfect and quite literal. Just one more breath here. And releasing those back down. Yeah, are you feeling it yet? Same, okay. All right, we'll replant those hands and take the opposite foot in front. So I had my left foot in front last time, so I'll swap it out for my right. And planting those hands on the wall. And then again, guiding with the heart forward into that stretch. So maybe finding where the feet feel good and supported. And it might feel good even when you get into that position to lift up the toes, stretch them out, place them back down, feeling a little bit more sturdy in your stance. And maybe even the same thing with your hands, maybe lifting the fingers away from the wall, spreading them back out, and replanting them on the wall. It's okay here to really let the chest kind of fall forward, opening up maybe through the armpits, the back body, and again, letting the forehead also really fall forward. So releasing that tension through the back of the neck, maybe even in the jaw. Gemini is all about communication. That's usually the first thing that is said about a Gemini influence or energy, is that it's about communication. And it's a beautiful thing how that is so embodied by perhaps a Gemini sun person. But we're talking about the energy here, not necessarily if you have a sun or moon or ascendant or Mercury and Gemini or something like that, though you may. We're talking about the energy of these things and perhaps how they correlate, very much how they correlate to your physical body. Again, allowing those micro movements to enhance your experience in your body as you please. Allowing your own curiosity to really guide you deeper into your experience. Gemini is also very perfectly ruled by the planet Mercury, said to be also the planet of communication. And if you're following along with the astrological ways, perhaps you do know that Mercury is in retrograde right now. And there's funny story and lore around that. And I think that a pretty neutral way of looking around about what that concept could be about is really just reflection, a time perhaps of slowing down, of being a bit more reflective. And who doesn't need that? A couple of more breaths here. All right, as you're ready, bending into those knees, stepping forward, peeling those hands away from the wall, and shaking that out. Woo! So really opening through these structures. And again, please utilizing your own guidance system, your own feeling to let you know when that's too much, or perhaps when you want more. And so this time we're actually going to take the hands around, fingertips up toward the armpits, and just releasing those wrists down toward your hips. Just a quick counterbalance here. Don't worry, we'll get on the floor pretty soon. We've been standing a lot. Kind of rinsing off the day, rinsing off the week in preparation for chilling out. You know what I mean? Just another breath here, rinsing those wrists out. Noticing if you do want to continue kind of coming forward. I know I do. All right, releasing those wrists. We'll step a little wider. We'll actually come down into a squat. So knees pointed out toward those pinky toes. We'll lower down into a squat. I'll lower this camera a little bit. Coming down into the Samasana squat. And if you know right away that this is your favorite, stay here. And if you're needing to come in and out of this, please do so as you need. This is pretty intense, especially if you live in this culture, as we don't do this unless you're in a class, typically. So again, another opportunity to lift up the toes and stretch them out, placing them back down, kind of dispersing that weight even in through the toes. While we're not trying to grip in through the toes, it's just another consideration, as perhaps the feet will fall forward, or they'll also come this way, or maybe out. I mean, typically, at least in my body, I know they'll typically come this way. And so I think it'll be helpful for me, and maybe you also, to pick up those toes and disperse that weight even a little bit into the other corners of the feet. At any time, once again, coming out of this, releasing, coming up with those hips and coming back in. But otherwise, another yin way of being in this posture is allowing the head, neck, and shoulders to release forward completely. And if so, continuing to bring that breath in through the back body. Planting those hands on the ground, maybe even shifting the weight forward a little bit more. Being patient here with your sensations, the things that are showing up to speak with you or to be heard or listened to this afternoon. We'll be here for some time, so take your time. Releasing at any time, coming back in. Another archetype of Gemini is the witness, the observer. And it is hungry for every story, every perspective. It must know every side. Gemini also teaches us of dexterity in that way, of what the purpose of duality is all about. You can't know one without the other. And in that way, it leads us to being able to share in good storytelling, story receiving. And it's also the archetype of the teacher. So being able to disperse this information that just lives in your head out with words, giving it away. It's sharp, inquisitive. This same energy too, when it is in excess, can be distracted, gossipy. It can kind of be spread too thin. Gemini energy really likes a lot to do and can suffer when it's bored. Doesn't do well when it's bored. It's an air sign. It doesn't really like that. It likes to be stimulated with information and doesn't do well with too few things to be doing. All right, 5 more breaths as you are. Seeing if you can settle into these hips, into these feet, into the back of the head, allowing the face to really come toward the ground a little bit more. As you're ready, we'll release into a forward fold. So simply standing up with those legs, toes pointed in, and just coming into a ragdoll, perhaps reaching for opposite elbow, and coming into the fronts of the feet. So maybe even lifting one heel and the other, bringing that weight a little bit more forward as the head comes toward the floor as well. Shaking that head yes and no. And if you prefer to be really bent in the knees so that the chest comes to rest on the knees, that might feel a little safer in through the hamstrings or all over. But again, continuing to bring a little bit more weight into the fronts of the feet, just for a little danger feeling. Not danger, just a little more spicy, exciting. And if you do so and it feels like a better idea for you to bring the hands onto the ground, do that. Continuing to bring deep and slow breaths into the bottom of the lungs, stretching into the belly, into the ribs. Let's take 3 more full breath cycles here in this forward fold. So maybe you bring a little bit more weight into the fronts of those feet. Maybe you bend a little deeper or straighten a little more through those legs. Wherever you're feeling it is where you need it. And if you're feeling it, you're doing it. As you're ready, we'll start to bend into those knees, coming into a seat. So moving nice and slowly into that seat. All right, now we're down here on the ground, finally. So we'll come into a nice tall seat here. Maybe shaking out that spine a little bit, forward and back. And as we're in a seat, we'll start to move into a shoelace. And so if you notice right away, whatever leg is in front or on top, we'll move in that direction. So my right leg is in the front, on top, and so I'll start with that. And if it feels good, you can actually start with the lower leg straight out underneath, and then stack the right knee over the left knee in this case. And if that is enough sensation, that is great. If you'd like to continue that by bending into the left knee, you can do so, bringing it over to the other side of the mat, stacking the knees over one another. You might come forward a little bit, and it might also feel really nice if you sit up on a blanket if this is not exactly the hip angle that works for you. So if you'd like, grabbing a blanket, scooting it under your sits bones, your ischial tuberosities, and then, again, whichever knee is in front will be twisting toward that knee. So planting, this is my right leg, so I'll take my right hand behind, and I'll turn so you can see what I'm doing here. Planting the right hand behind, inhale, left hand up and overhead, and simply placing that on the knee. Inhale, lengthen, exhale, twist over toward that right shoulder. So inhale, lengthen, and exhale, twist toward that shoulder. We'll do this for 5 or so full breaths. So yes, while this isn't super yin style, we'll take a yang version twist before coming deeper into this yin shoelace. Even guiding the chin over toward that shoulder and the eyes all the way over to that side. So all the way over to the right in this case, or to the left if you're starting there. It's okay that there's effort and discomfort, perhaps in the shoulders, perhaps in the chest, maybe you're even feeling it in the lungs. But again, using your internal guidance system of alerts, perhaps there's pain, numbness, etc., you know when it's time to back out, and you know when it's sort of, I guess I hear people say hurt good, good hurt. All right, as you're ready, coming back to center and simply unwinding that twist, a brief twist in the other direction for one breath, and exhale back to center. And as you're ready, we'll drape forward over the legs. So that might simply mean shifting forward and allowing the head to come forward toward the chest, tipping the chin toward the clavicle. Or you might be ready to come all the way down forward onto the legs. Another option is to utilize your props, anything you have nearby. If you have a bolster, great. If you don't, use a pillow or a couch cushion or something other squishy big you have. Perhaps you have nice things you can share with your animals. This can also be a nice alternative if simply leaning forward or the flexibility isn't there and you have to hold yourself back and you're not able to enjoy the sensation. So this also might be a great alternative to coming forward into this posture. So taking a couple of breaths to find what variation is going to serve you, and that might even look kind of like this, like allowing the head to come forward onto your bolster, and you can even allow the lower body to kind of collapse, because we're not really doing something that needs you to have, we'll say, a certain kind of form, because we're working with connective tissue. We're working with the reticular fibers, we're working with the fascia, we're working with a different kind of force on your musculoskeletal system. Therefore, there's less chance of an injury because we're moving really slowly and we're kind of targeting a different area or we're targeting something different. So don't worry about having a particular form other than what feels correct in the body. And you can utilize a number system, perhaps a percentage or a 0 to 10. You know, if we're using a pain scale of 0 to 10, we don't really want to cross a 7, 7.5. And if we're using a percentage into a stretch, perhaps starting with 50, 60% of a stretch instead of slamming into 100% and trying to hold that there. That makes sense? So as we're here, we're hanging out in the hips, and perhaps you've come forward, and perhaps this is enough. And it might even feel good to come forward and just allow the arms to rest as the intensity or whatever you're feeling works itself out in the lower body. But wherever you are, feel a little more. Release a little more. Utilizing more time at a less intense pace is not really our way. It's not really super popular. And I'm not here to convince you of anything that you don't already know intrinsically, something you're born with. Simply utilizing ideas and synthesizing some along the way, perhaps. Allowing the back of the neck to release. Maybe squeezing the jaws together and releasing. Squeezing the hands and the feet, releasing those as well. The Gemini influence gives us open-mindedness. It speaks to what your message is. It's also fascinated with contradictions and paradoxes and negotiation. That's also a very Geminian term. So here, you're kind of having a negotiation with the forces applied to the body, what you're okay with, what you're into, what you're not so okay with, where the boundaries are. It's very quick-witted, Gemini, and cerebral. Some of the physical ailments also associated with the sign of Gemini have to do with some lung dysfunctions, perhaps emphysema, even colds. Some other things having to do with lung infections. And we've already talked about some of the hand and arm and wrist dysfunctions. Let's take another 4 full breaths here on the side of shoelace. As you're ready, we'll start to rise back up into a seat. Swing backward, planting those hands, unwinding those legs, maybe planting them windshield wiper to the side, or take whatever release that you would prefer. Whew. All right, as you're ready, we'll set up for that other side. All right, for me, I'm then moving on to my left side, the left leg on top. And again, you can start with that right leg out in front, and your sides may be really different, and if so, that's fine. Don't need to add to more judgment or anything there. Just simply noticing, again, maybe taking a note from the Gemini influence and simply witnessing. Or that knee wants to bend, and then that left leg is on top of right. Maybe you situate, maybe you don't use a blanket this time, or you do. I'm going to use a blanket, sit up underneath. I'll turn so you can see me. And right away, as we're in these postures for minutes, please consider the forces and torque that will change over time. And if they are speaking to you loudly, perhaps if a knee starts to feel unstable or bad, undo that posture. So for example, right now, if this knee, whichever knee, starts to say, I don't know about this, back out. Again, we're taking that 40, 50, 60% instead of 80, 90, 100. Okay, so we're moving into the twist on this side, planting that left hand behind. Inhale, reach that hand, the right hand up and over. Exhale, bring it to the knee, twisting over to that opposite side. A couple of rounds here to get to that full extension or full expression, whatever. Inhale, lengthen up through the spine. Exhale, gaze over that left shoulder. Really involving kind of as many parts as you can here as you engage consciously with effort. Here we are purposefully rinsing the ribs as we kind of move this axis really far away from where they normally are. So stretching in through the pecs up here, stretching in through the upper shoulders. Maybe you even feel it as you breathe deeply in through these upper ribs. Plugging this left shoulder into its socket and down. Noticing where it is you do feel this, perhaps the same or different than the other side. Let's take 3 more breaths here in this effort. As you're ready, we'll come back to center all the way around, releasing, taking a brief counter stretch over that other side. Back to center, and again, we'll come forward over those legs any amount. It might feel good to just have the hands behind you as you tilt your hips forward, coming forward and releasing the chin. And again, these will change over time, over breaths, over minutes, over years. These things change. And maybe you're noticing that you'd like a different configuration than you did on the other side. Play with those things you have nearby. You don't need specific yoga props per se, though they are helpful. As you come forward over those legs, any amount, broadening now through the back body, bringing in that breath in through the back of the lungs. Imagining that you could even bring that breath directly into the back body, in through the back of the ribs, in through those erector muscles, the rhomboids, the traps, the lats. And maybe this is more intense on this side, or maybe you're not feeling much at all. How can you observe even more? How can you be more patient, inquisitive, curious about what it is that you are experiencing in this now? Gemini is also at home in the 3rd house. So in the house system of all 12 of the pie slices, the 3rd house is where Gemini is at home. And the 3rd house is about left brain, practicality, communication, lightheartedness, sociability. It's also thoughts and writing and publishing. Or maybe not publishing. It's peers and siblings, maybe more immediate kind of communication. I think that's the 9th house, publishing. There will be a sign and it has a corresponding planet and a house. Similar energies or similar forces. giving your sensation a little bit more attention, a little bit more compassion, a little bit more breath. Imagining that you could draw this breath directly into where it is you're feeling, into where the cells even connect to each other with collagen, with water. The collagen, the reticular fibers, the water, the bio water that is you. Even how your two cells connect to each other with this life, this sort of liquid collagenous barrier. And over time, the collagen can squeeze out the water. You can become dehydrated on a cellular level and be more prone to injury. We, throughout the life, humans will become more dried out. Perhaps you've noticed. And while that is sort of just part of the deal, we can also do things like this to prolong our parts. Just a couple more breaths on this side. 2 more full breaths here. And as you're ready, starting to slowly come back up to a seat. And swing those hands back behind you once again, unwinding those legs. Maybe cartwheel, no, maybe windshield wiper those legs side to side, or it might feel good to bicycle, bringing those legs in or stretching up through those legs, long toward the ceiling. We'll come onto the spine just briefly, or for one thing, and we'll come into a happy baby. So reaching for ankles or for the feet, inner or outer edges of those feet, maybe taking a breath or so to figure out what version of that's going to really work for you. And you might take a slightly moving version here as you flatten out through the back, maybe figure out where the shoulders want to be, maybe bringing those feet in toward one another, and stretching out through one leg or the other before coming into that total stillness. If you have some cracks, need to move their way out. And as you're ready, starting to settle in, finding where that happy baby would like to live for a few breaths, maybe a minute or so. Because as we're doing a yin style movement series, we'll be in these postures for at least a minute, if it's not a counter or something like that. So letting those knees really come toward the floor, feet toward the ceiling, and hands, at least how I experience it, the contact my hands will have with feet or with ankles gives a way for my arms to not have to do any work, but for just the force, or just the opening of the legs, knees coming toward the ground to be enough force. There's not a lot of effort in the arms, if that makes sense. Let's take 5 more full breaths here in this happy baby. think that's about 5. As you're ready, releasing those feet, bringing those knees in, squeezing those knees in together, slightly rolling side to side. And as you're ready, coming back up to a seat, maybe rolling forward and back for a couple of, fun movements. We'll come up into a seat once again. And from here, we'll do this really fun thing where the hands face away, planting those hands just behind the glutes. And the feet are also, pretty wide, maybe not the width of the mat, but just as they are resting. And we'll pick up the glutes, move them toward your feet, shifting forward, planting glutes, and then curve out through your chest so that you're pointing the spine toward the floor and allowing the shoulders to extremely internally rotate. So kind of like you're slouching. And then allowing the head to come forward as well. So your whole spine is really, really tucked. And it might also feel good to walk those feet a little wider for a bit more support. But again, those are more fine-tuned moments for you to consider in your own body what would feel better. Or maybe even getting closer to the glutes would feel good in the elbows, the wrists, the shoulders. This also might be pretty intense. If so, you can back out a little bit. Maybe bringing the glutes a little bit closer toward the arms instead of all the way close to the legs. But again, either way, releasing that chin toward the clavicle and opening up through those elbows. And it's okay that it feels uncomfortable. The point of it is not to be in comfort. The point, in my mind, at least for this practice, is to expand what the zone is of comfort in the body by walking gently up to those edges, the boundaries, and hanging out there, maybe at 40% intensity. So you're having a conversation, maybe a little negotiation about maybe this is okay, maybe I'll back off a little bit. So by no means is it boring. This is particularly good for the muscles of the upper and lower arms. So where the bicep brachii connect into the elbow, where all of the extensors and flexors of the lower arm connect into the elbow pit. And again, if it's too intense, you can bend a little bit through the elbow, come back in. It's okay for this to experience, it's okay for the elbow pits to experience a different load, especially if it's not making you grind your teeth, cry, it's not too intense. But it's okay if it's kind of intense. Riding that line of comfort and discomfort for the sake of expanding into more of being you, worth it. Let's take 4 more full breaths where you are. All right, as you're ready, we'll reverse that move, picking up the hips, moving them back toward the arms, and then we'll slowly bring those arms around. Moving nice and gently, undoing all that. Maybe moving slowly through the wrists and elbows, and then eventually some big moves. And it's okay, again, if you're doing this kind of kick through those arms, through those elbows, because this is how they don't dry out. All right, as you're ready, we'll come back down onto the spine. We'll come into a twist. So you don't have to have things nearby, but maybe if you like to support, we'll simply bring the right knee in, squeezing it in toward the body, taking a simple supine twist, bringing it across to the left side of your mat, opening up that right limb toward the right, coming into this twist. And as you're here in this twist, I invite you to continue drawing in these really nice full breaths into the side body, into the belly, into the lungs. Because it's both this combination of the different forces that are involved with the twist, involved with the rotation of the spine, involved with this big elongation of this right side body and the tuck under of the left in this instance, and the motion of the breath as you inhale, as you pull in this breath and also stretch the lungs. It's really stretching all the other muscles, but as the breath fills up the lungs and opens up the belly, opens up the ribs, and stretches the rib cage from the inside. And you know what that feels like. You know that feels good. And sometimes it feels catchy, and sometimes it's a bit stuck. But you know what it feels like to feel unstuck. You know what it feels like to be in a curious, open, communicative relationship with yourself. You know what it feels like to curate and to create safety within yourself by way of this open communication, so that you can allow curiosity to be your guidance, or at least part of it. Curiosity also gives us this sort of sense of a purified, it's sort of a pure influence. It feels pure from where curiosity is coming. It wants to just know more. It wants to simply witness. It wants to hear, listen, as well as speak. Let's take 3 more luxurious breaths into these lungs. As you're ready, we'll start to move back onto the spine. Coming back to center, squeezing that right knee and also the left knee in toward the body. Exhale that right leg long, squeezing the left knees into the body. And as you exhale, guiding it across the body, coming into that other side twist. Noting if the knee is floating, the shoulder floating, or one or both of them are touching the ground. Continuing to draw in these deep and nourishing full breaths. Soften somewhere. Become a little easier somewhere. Let's take 3 more breaths here. As you're ready, we'll slowly move back to center. Bringing both knees again into the chest, squeezing them in. Maybe taking some circles in through those knees and hips. And we'll next set up for our final resting pose. And in this final resting pose, we'll do a little bit of breath work before coming into complete stillness. So it might feel really nice to cover up with a blanket. It might also feel really nice to experience a heart opener here. So if you do have a bolster or something you'd like to lie over while doing a little bit of breath work, that might feel really nice. So you take any posture, any props into consideration, and we'll move into that rest. So maybe covering up, finding a really comfortable lying down position. I'm just going to sit up so I can speak and be heard a little better. So as you're lying down, feeling the back of your head, the back of your spine melt into the mat or whatever else you're lying on. And we're simply going to engage in a square breath. So a square breath meaning we'll have the same number of counts as you inhale, same number of counts that you hold at the top, hold full, and the same number of counts you exhale, and the same number of counts you hold empty. So what that means is that we'll inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll hold full, 3, 2, 1. We'll empty, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 3, 2, 1. And it's like that. So like as I give the cue, it kind of counts as 1, 2, 3, 4. You see what I'm talking about? Okay. As you're ready, emptying all the breath from your lungs, we'll inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 2, 1. Exhale, 3, 2, 1. Hold empty, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 3, 2, 1. Empty, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 3, 2, 1. A little longer this time. Inhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 3, 2, 1. Oh, good gravy. Empty. 4, 3, 2, 1. Last time. Inhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold empty. 4, 3, 2, 1. Release any effort, letting the lungs and the body return to its normal breath. Moving effortlessly into our final Shavasana, and our final rest here. We'll be here for about 1 minute. So as you are here, I encourage you to move into complete stillness. I'd like to close with 2 questions. Sometimes it's quotes, sometimes it's poems. These last questions are, what kind of information do you find soothing? What kind of information do you find soothing? And where in your life are you a good teacher? Where in your life are you a good teacher? As you're ready, we'll inhale into the lungs. Exhale, sigh it out. Maybe you want to move to a side, or maybe you want to stay where you are. Totally fine for longer. But if you're ready to close with me, you're invited to do so. Eventually coming up to a seat, maybe you roll to a side first or up and down the spine. Fluttering those eyes closed for one last breath. Inhale fully. And exhale fully. Briefly bring those hands to heart center, shining a light of gratitude on your interiority for showing up, for practicing, for trying something new, for getting curious. The teacher, the light, the dark in me sees and so appreciates the teacher, the light, the dark in you. Thank you so much.